Hey there, fans of pounding heavy music. This is Peter Sco for Music as a Journey. Today's video comes completely as a surprise for me. It just came to me during the week that I should try to make this video this weekend here. Unplanned completely. See, the thing is that I recently got Impact is Imminent, the latest album by Anvil. I am a few months behind. However, as the story goes, background information, of course I had Forged in Fire by Anvil on cassette in the 1980s. And a funny story about Metal on Metal. I actually bought it on cassette for a friend for his birthday. And after a few years, he was getting rid of a lot of his cassettes. The ones that he wasn't really all that interested in. And before he got rid of them, he offered some for me to buy from him if I wanted. And I thought, hey, yeah, Anvil Metal on Metal, the cassette version. Sure, I'll take that off your hands. And I bought it from him. And later on it occurred to me, didn't I buy this for him as a birthday present? So I paid money for this to give to him, and then I paid money to him to get it back again. There's just something weird about that. But anyway, it was just something I used to tease him about. But yeah, so of course, during the 80s, I knew about the Metal on Metal album and the Forged in Fire album. The actual song Forged in Fire, for me at the time, that was just one of those really almost like iconic or anthemic metal tracks, such as like Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, Judas Priest, Electric Eye and the Hellion, or Screaming for Vengeance, Accept, Balls to the Wall. If I were to make a compilation of just like the most metal tracks of 83, 84, and I didn't know about Metallica yet, I would have included Forged in Fire on that one. So anyway, of course, after that, didn't know anything about what was going on with Anvil for decades. I did hear about the movie, the Anvil Story movie that came out, well, probably already 13 years ago by now. By that time, I was living in Japan, of course, had been for a while, and Anvil had quite a presence in Japan back in the day, and I think still their name kind of resonates because it was fairly talked about on television at the time about that new movie that came out. But anyway, and at that time I thought, okay, I should probably check out what Anvil are doing these days. I should get their latest album, which at the time was This Is 13, their 13th album. And it kind of just stuck in my head for years and years. And yeah, even back like about 10 years ago, I decided to pick up a lot of the albums that I had really enjoyed in the 80s that I had on cassette. I decided to pick them up on CD, and that's when I got Metal on Metal and Forged in Fire on CD. And still it was in my mind to get This Is 13, and finally I heard about Impact is Imminent was coming out, and I thought, well, alright, then that will be the next Anvil album I get, my third Anvil album. Months went by, I finally got it, and I've been listening to it. Actually, I find that I quite enjoy it. It's what I expected an Anvil album to sound like. But there are some things to say about this, so let's see here. So first of all, after I ordered the album, I then went ahead to check what other people were saying about it, and the review on the Angry Metal Guy website was kind of promising anyway. It started off like, oh, this is another Anvil album, you know, the last few have been kind of repetitive, you know, but this new one here has a little extra spark to it. There are some little bit more memorable tracks on here, and so the review was modest to say the least, but at least it sounded like this album was more interesting than some of their recent ones. Alright. Anyway, I got it, I listened to it, and I thought, yeah, it's an Anvil album as I would have expected it to be. It's a traditional heavy metal album. It's that, of course it has some speed metal in it, you know, because Anvil were instrumental in developing the speed metal and inspiring the thrash metal scene, which was one of the things I thought was really cool to read about. There were some other reviews that I have read since then, or even some video reviews where, you know, the average review basically says that it's an Anvil album. You're going to get from it what you would expect from an Anvil album. It's kind of like with Motorhead or AC/DC. They don't really develop their style. They just make album after album in the same style, and then of course every album will have some songs that you'll probably like and some songs you probably will not like so much. And Anvil is the type that writes choruses where they just repeat the song title 4 times or something like that and usually don't add anything else. But one of the things that's very interesting is that the music is heavy, of course. It's riff-based music. There's some cool soloing. Rob Reiner on drums gets a lot of credit for what he does. Some people have a problem with the vocals of Lips. I don't. I'm just, that's his style. That's what you get with Anvil, and so I don't have a problem with them. I actually think they're good. And in fact, just listening to this album again today, my impression is that it's really amazing that these guys are, what, like in their mid-60s now? This album is actually full of energy and vigor. I mean, there's nothing on here to say that this is a bunch of guys in their 60s. These guys are playing as if they're still in their like 30s. So, yeah, I have to say, like, I'm not a fan of every single song on there, but it's pretty cool. Now, as it so happens, I also saw a video recently. Rich Rolls, I think his name is. He does podcasts, and he had an interview with Sacha Grevavis, who was the guy who made the Anvil Story movie, and Rob Reiner and Lips together. And it was about 2 hours long, but it was really good because I felt, you know, they talked a lot about the movie, and Sacha talked the most, I think. He's quite a storyteller. But there were a lot of things I didn't know about the band. I mean, I hardly know nothing about the band anyway, hardly know anything, but some of the things that were pointed out was Sacha was, he grew up in London, and his mom was a concert pianist who'd studied at the Juilliard. His father was working at the United Nations in New York. And he just really was into metal, and he really got into Anvil. And his mother was driven crazy by it. But when Anvil came to town, he went down to see them at the Marquee. I think it was the famous Marquee Club, you know. And there was a scene he described where the lead vocalist at the time for the Michael Schenker group was there with his girlfriend and arguing with the security guy about getting the girlfriend in the backstage to speak with Anvil in the dressing room or whatever. So at that moment, Sacha, 14 and a half years old, snuck in past the security guard and went into this room where there was like Steve Harris and some of the guys from Iron Maiden. There was Fast Eddie Clark, and there were just like, it was a who's who of who was in the British heavy metal scene at the time. They'd all come in to speak to this, you know, Canadian group Anvil that was making such a storm. And Sacha just went straight up to Rob and Lips and just started talking to them about the music and asking Rob about his drumming because Sacha was into drumming and so on. And they were just so impressed that this kid from London, you know, they were from Toronto, and this kid from London just knew so much about the music. And so they asked him, would you like to join us on a tour sometime and be our drum tech? You know, help set up the drums and so on. So he managed to go off to New York during his summer break, meet up with his dad and say, Dad, I'm here to see you, but actually the real reason why I'm here is because I want to get permission from you to, you know, go on tour for 3 weeks with Anvil, this heavy metal band I like. And his dad was like, I want to meet these guys first. And so his dad went in and met with Lips and I think Rob as well. And he came out and he said, you can go on the tour. These guys gave me their word that nothing bad's going to happen to you. They're going to take care of you. I believe them. So you have my blessing, which is a really cool thing. And that podcast had tons of really cool stories on there. It did, maybe after about an hour and a half, start to kind of recycle some of the ideas, which, yeah, maybe I don't need to watch it till the end. But at the end, there were some fresh ideas as well. So if you have a chance to see it, I think it's Rich Rolls, his name, doing a podcast, live video interview anyway, with Sacha Grevavis and Lips and Rob Reiner. Really cool. And one other story I want to mention about it that was really funny. They were talking about when they made the movie. And at first, you know, they started filming it, and one of the first scenes they filmed was the scene where Lips gets in an altercation with the club manager because they're not the club owner, because they're not getting paid after they've done their performance. And afterwards, the cameraman, who knew Sacha well because, you know, they'd, you know, been in the Hollywood scene, he said, I want to talk to you about something. And they went back to the hotel, went into the hotel room, and the cameraman locked the door and turned around and looked at Sacha and he said, these guys aren't actors, are they? And I thought it was just really funny, the way Sacha set that up anyway. That the cameraman was thinking they were going to be doing like a live documentary with the real guys, and just the way things were going down, these guys aren't actors, are they? So anyway, the reason why I brought this up in the first place was because this album has two instrumental tracks. One is called Teabag, one is called Gomez. Both of them are dedicated to Sacha Grevavis, and basically it's the same instrumental, just one has horns and one doesn't. But anyway, when Sacha was 15 and he was on tour with the band, his nickname was Teabag because he was English. They called him Teabag. And in later years, when they met up with him and they were at some party or something, and he said to some other people, I have got the best train set in all of Hollywood. And they thought, oh my gosh, you're like Gomez Adams. And so they called him Gomez. So both Teabag and Gomez on this album are for Sacha Grevavis, who was also the guy who put the whole Anvil movie together. That is a big part of the story of that podcast, so you can watch that and check that out. Okay, some other reviews about this I should mention. There have been some reviews that were really like, it's another Anvil album and there's nothing really interesting there, and the vocals, can't stand the vocals, and the uninspiring, blah blah blah. It sounds like that person was never much of an Anvil fan anyway. And then there was another review that actually really praised a lot of the songs. I was interested in the Sea of Tranquility review of the album because Pete Pardo, I tend to agree a lot with what he talks about. Not everything, but I agree a lot with what he says. His review of the album was, it's an Anvil album, and there's 5 or 6, pretty decent songs, but some of them are not so great. The song about lockdown, we've had enough of the lockdown, the whole COVID thing, so we really don't need to be reminded about it in songs. Anyway, so his overall feeling about Anvil in general was, it's okay. But I checked the No Life Till Metal site by Scott Waters, who also has the No Life Till Metal channel that I watch sometimes, and he didn't have the last 2 Anvil albums on there, but he did have all of them, including the compilations, the live album, and some of the EPs and so on, and he just seems to love Anvil. Not every song, again, of course, but he just had lots of praise for each album. And actually, there were some comments that were left by Lips, which he then included as part of his review of each of the albums. Okay, so anyway, I like it, and it actually has inspired me now to check out more albums by Anvil. I am a little bit cautious because I know that Anvil's albums don't really diversify a lot. There might be one that has a little more speed metal or thrash than others, or one that has a little bit more traditional kind of like hard rock metal, like the kind of late 70s rock and roll type metal style, There might be some albums that have a little bit more of that, but overall they don't really deviate so much. So the main thing is basically the overall sound, the production, which, by the way, on this one sounds terrific. So I thought I would check out some of their other albums, and so far the one that I managed to pick up is Worth the Wait, which came out, I think it's 1992. Yeah, 1992, 3 years after their previous one, Pound for Pound, which gets a lot of good favorable reviews. I have just listened to it once through this morning, actually. Sounds great. It is a pretty good, solid, heavy metal album. And I've got a few more on order that are coming in. I expect they're going to be more or less the same. But yeah, for now, that seems to be where my musical interest has led me to Anvil, and I know what I'm going to get. There's going to be no surprise, but I know I'm going to enjoy a lot of the songs on the albums, whatever people have to say about them. Okay, so aside from, me doing this little chit-chat about my recent interest in Anvil and kind of a cover of a review of the latest album, I also decided, while I was going to starting to look into what albums to get, to check out people's rankings and ratings of the albums. And I just thought, you know what, why don't I just put together a ranking like I have done before, where I just check various websites, see how people have ranked or rated the albums, and then, find the average. And that's what I've done. So on this sheet of paper here, I'm going to tell you the 19 studio albums of Anvil, how they rank overall based on several different websites. Okay, so what I checked were 2 ratings of rankings of albums on Rate Your Music. Metal Music Archives. There is not a ranking, but a rating system. So this is based on out of 5. Is it out of 5? Yeah, it's out of 5, and then we get the average here. I think most of the albums had at least 3 ratings. Some of them, obviously Metal on Metal, going up to 37 ratings. The latest album had only 1 rating. So in this case here, the ratings are kind of skewered because, of course, if one person rates the album and gives it a high score, then that album is going to have a high score. In this case, 3.5. Well, kind of middle of the road score, but anyway, you know, with more scores, with more ratings, if you get, like, for example, Forged in Fire, 4.12 out of 27 ratings, that's a little bit more of a clear rating because that many people have rated it. But anyway, that's what I had to work with. Also, Encyclopedia Metallum, the metal archives, they have ratings out of 100%. And some of these albums had the same percentage. 3 albums had 75%. No, 3 had 72%, 2 had 75%. There were some others that had the same as well. So what I did for that was the highest rated album was number 1, and then there was number 2. But if there were 2 number 2s, I rated them, I put them both in as a rank of 2, and then I skipped 3 and went on to 4. So when we have, I think we had 3 6th place albums. So I just said all 3 are 6th place and then skipped up to 8th place, or however I had to adjust it. So that the lowest rated album came in at 19th. Okay, there was Metal of the 1990s. This was a YouTube video, which was just over 6 minutes long. The guy gave a brief description of each album, very brief, which I thought was rather well done. And there were some lovely photos, a lovely young lady posing with albums, yeah, Anvil albums. Then let's see here, there was Metal Storm, which had ratings out of 10, so again, 7.3, 8.2. And finally, there was Best Ever Albums, which had 14 of the 19 albums listed on there. So some albums being absent, it means when I did the average, most of the albums, I totaled up their score and divided by 7, but some of them were off this one list here, so I divided by 6. Okay, that's how I did it. Let's take a look at how these albums ranked. Album number 19 was Legal at Last from 2020, the album just before this one here. And Legal at Last was kind of a celebration of marijuana being legalized in Canada. Hip hip hooray. I've never done it, but, you know, hey, apparently Lips was pretty thrilled about that. So, yeah, that one came in, I think it was ranked 18th on one list and 20 on one list because they included the live album. Yeah, I think it's probably best rating was, oh, there was number 3 on Best Albums Ever. It landed the number 3 spot. Probably it's not a really bad album overall, I guess. You know, if you're a fan of Anvil or you like that thing. But anyway, that one came in at 19. 18th place went to Back to Basics from 2004, which more or less got fairly low ratings. And one comment even just being that it was the least inspired sounding album among all of them. Okay, Back to Basics from 2004 in 18th place. 17th place went to Hope in Hell from 2013. It actually got the lowest rating on Encyclopedia Metallum with 57%. Ooh, ouch. But it also, let's see, did anybody rate it fairly highly? The highest position was on the Metal of the 1990s video. The guy actually ranked it in slot number 5. I listened to the first 3 or 4 tracks of this album on YouTube because I thought, like, how bad. Let me hear what a bad Anvil album sounds like. And honestly, I thought it sounded fine. So I've put it on standby in my Amazon shopping cart. I'll get it at some point. But it just seems that Anvil albums are pretty much similar. So I think it's very hard to say which one is bad. But obviously, people have listened to all of the albums and they've come up with the opinion that Hope in Hell was not really one of the better ones. But yeah. Okay, so that was slot number 17. Let me see here. 16 went to Pounding the Pavement from 2018. Truth being told, basically the last 5 Anvil albums, most of them did not get rated fairly highly. And I think it's just because they're probably the same kind of style. So people are rating them low because there's nothing really new and great. But on the other hand, like I said, when you buy an Anvil album, you probably can expect, things to be a certain way. And as long as they're that way and they're good enough, I think. So what was that? That was 17th, 16th place, which I said went to Pounding the Pavement from 2018. Anything spectacular to say about it? It had a 2.08 rating on Metal Music Archives, which is not very favorable. That's below half. All right. Falling into, I guess the highest was on Best Ever Albums. It actually came in 5th place on that one there, and 7th place on Metal of the 1990s. So it's like it's mostly low, but a couple of places gets a little bit higher rated. 15th place went to 2016's Anvil is Anvil, which I think its highest position was maybe a rank of 7 on Metal Storm. Yeah, and 12 on Metal of the 1990s and one of the Rate Your Music lists. Okay, 15th, so let's see here, 14th place went to Impact is Imminent. Someone ranked it at 19, but they ranked the last 3 albums at 17, 18, and 19. There was also a Best Ever Albums put it in spot number 6, and let me see here, the best rating, actually Encyclopedia Metallum had it at 82%, which was actually in 4th place. So it seemed that, again, the reviews were all over the place, which is the rankings, which is what I'm finding with a lot of the Anvil albums. They'll get a couple of like very low rankings, a couple in the middle, and then one fairly high up. And this seems to be the case for almost all of the albums. So I think it's really hard you can look at a list and say, okay, that's the worst album. And then you'll see on another list, it's slot number 5. Which is why I did the average, just to see, because I was just finding there was such a variety of rankings for these albums. Let's see here, that was number 14, so number 13 went to 1987's Strength of Steel. This was an album that came out 4 years after Forged in Fire, and they had some trouble with their label. The label had also released a compilation album without the band's consent, like they really needed it. It's like, oh, well, we own the rights to these, we'll release the album. Whatever. And I think also I remember hearing that there was some dispute among the band members where 2 band members thought they should bring Anvil into a little bit more of a commercial sound for 1987, because like metal was really, really big by that time. Whitesnake, and other bands like that. But Lips and one of the other members wanted to keep with Anvil's intense sound, and by this time Anvil had basically fallen out of popularity. The Metal on Metal and Forged in Fire inspired bands like Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax, and a lot of these guys. But by the time they came back 4 years later, the whole scene had taken off and passed them by. And given that there was a dispute about which way the sound should go, it probably didn't really help all that much. But anyway, that's spot number 13. Spot number 12 goes to Still Going Strong from 2002. Not really anything particularly to say about that. It basically falls into the mid to low ranking range. And then spot number 7 to the album before that, Plenty of Power from 2001. Which I've read 2 different versions. One said that it was more of a rock and roll type thing, like the previous album had been a very speedy album, so they decided to do something different for Plenty of Power. But another review said that it was a really intense, heavy album, so I guess I'm going to have to find out by listening to it. Interesting, the albums of Anvil, they all have a 3-word title where the first and last word have the same phonetic sound or letter, and Plenty of Power, if you read the abbreviation, spells out pop. Okay, a small side note there. Spot number 10 went to Absolutely No Alternative from 1997. again, nothing all that spectacular to say. The average rank overall, everyone's putting it somewhere around the middle, slightly above middle, slightly below middle. It's like with a lot of these here. Number 9 was Hard and Heavy, the debut album from 1981. I heard that, it was really different. It was more based on the 70s hard rock sound. But I started listening to it on YouTube, and actually I thought it sounded pretty good. It's, 1981 heavy metal sound. It's right in there with that. So, yeah, decided to check that one out as well, meaning I've ordered a copy. 8th place went to Plugged In Permanent from 1996. It shows an anvil dropping onto an acoustic guitar. I think the mid-1990s were where a lot of people were doing these unplugged albums, and Anvil's statement was that we will never be unplugged. And I think that's pretty much true. Every album is basically an electric album. I've heard maybe one track on here that had a bit of acoustic guitar. Maybe they've got a few other like that, but basically Anvil never are going to be unplugged. That was number 8. Number 7 went to Speed of Sound from 1999, which is said to be an album that is actually a faster album. It is more thrashy than most of their albums. I think its highest rank was 3rd place on one of those Rate Your Music lists, and 3rd place on the Metal of the 1990s. So I've ordered it. I have pretty high expectations for that one. Speed of Sound at 7. Album spot number 6 went to This Is 13, their independently released album, which was what they were making at the time that the movie was covering their story. That's the album they were working on. Spot number 5, the album right after that, Juggernaut of Justice from 2011, landing a 4th place. Again, Metal of the 1990s and a Rate Your Music list gave it 4th place. One of these Rate Your Music lists and the Metal of the 1990s video, there were a lot of similar scores. I almost had to wonder if it wasn't the same guy who had prepared the list one time and made the video another time and had just changed his mind a little bit. I don't know, could possibly be that. But that's number 5, Juggernaut of Justice, which I have not ordered, but it is on standby. Then we go to number 4, Worth the Wait from 1992. That's this one here, which was, it is a good, solid, heavy album with some very speedy songs on there. Nice, I like it. Worth the Wait in 4th place. 3rd place going to 1988's Pound for Pound, the album just before this one here, which I have ordered that now finally too. I decided to give in even though I actually shouldn't have. I should have waited a month, but what the heck. Yeah, and I think that one is also said to be a very good, solid, heavy album. It landed the number 2 spot on one of the Rate Your Music lists, 5 spot on another Rate Your Music list, 8th place on Best Albums Ever, 89% with Encyclopedia Metallum, which was the number 1 rated album on Encyclopedia Metallum, the Metal Archives. So that's pretty cool. So that brings us up to, number 1 and number 2. So overall, number 2 ended up being Metal on Metal, the second album from 1982. It got the 1st place position on one list. 2 lists had it in 1st place, 2 lists had it in 2nd place. It is the 5th highest rated album on the Encyclopedia Metallum with 80%, and it is the 4th highest rated album on Metal Music Archives with 3.96. But overall, considered one of Anvil's 2 really big classic albums. I guess you could say pound for pound too, but the ones that really made the impression, had the influence on the music scene would have been Metal on Metal. Where are you hiding? Metal on Metal down there. And the number 1 album is, of course, Forged in Fire from 1983, scoring 2 number 2 positions, 2 number 1 positions, 84% on Encyclopedia Metallum, the 2nd highest rated album after Pound for Pound, and 4.12 on Metal Music Archives, the 2nd highest rated album after Plenty of Power, if you can believe it. Yeah. So there you go. That is the average rank of Anvil albums over 7 different websites out there. Now I have contributed myself. You have 8 lists you can check. I am a bit worried about getting into Anvil because it is 19 albums, and the pattern for me is that I think I'll get a few of the best ones, and then I'll find there's a few more, and then I'll think, okay, I'll get 10, and that one and that one. So 12, 12. I'll get 12. And then I'll hear about one, and I'll think, oh, let me check it out. Okay, it's not that bad. I'll get that one too. And suddenly it's like, there's only a few albums I don't have now. And if I like all the other ones enough, I'll probably like the other ones too. And then I end up just getting all. So I don't really want to do that with Anvil because there are other albums I've been meaning to get that I have not gotten yet. And I think I should. But I kind of have to follow which way my musical journey takes me, right? So anyway, that's my little video thing there about Anvil, and yeah, love the band. You want to check out the band more? I think they're kind of okay. Maybe might want to pick up an album or two. Well, hopefully I've been able to help you somehow in considering the band. All right, yeah, comments are of course welcome. If anybody has anything to say about Anvil or a favorite album, then please leave a comment. And that's where I'm going to wrap up the video for today. Thanks all for watching, and see you again on the next one. I'll get it out when I've got the time. All right, take care everyone. Stay safe. Bye.